police brutality. Those are words that run shivers and fevers.
Binadamu, sisi kama wananchi wa Kenya, tuko na haki ya kuongea, tuko na haki ya kuprotest, tuko na haki ya kuishi.
Jioni amerudi nyumbani bila ile mzigo alikuwa amenunua ya kufanya biashara. Jioni familia yake imemkosa, ameuawa.
At least 4 people had family members who disappeared and they don't know what happened to them.
Prosecutors do not win or lose cases. We are ministers of justice.
In 2016, human rights lawyer Willy Kimani, his client Josephat Mwendwa, and a taxi driver Joseph Mwiruri were abducted and murdered. A public outcry led to the arrest and prosecution of those involved, but in the years that have followed, disappearances linked to state agencies have continued unabated, and survivors of the missing and the dead are left to bear the burden of grief as government distances itself from abduction that later become murders.
Binadamu, sisi kama wananchi wa Kenya, tuko na haki ya kuongea, tuko na haki ya kuprotest, tuko na haki ya kuishi. Sasa zile anakatiza maisha ya watoto, vijana hao, amefanya nini? So unaona kama anahangaisha wale watoto wadogo.
It is unfortunate that people within Kenya are still being tortured, and we still have enforced disappearances. Whether the time is political or not, we can see within the survey that we did, we found out that at least 4 people had family members who disappeared and they don't know what happened to them. And they actually suspect that this was done, this was state instigated.
And as the numbers keep increasing, a majority of the population has normalized these occurrences. For large sections of the society, these killings, these disappearances have become, sadly, a part of life.
The DPP does not convict anyone. Quite mistakenly, the public out there believe that the prosecutor holds the magic stick that should send these people to jail. The duty of a prosecutor is this: you receive the evidence from your investigators, look at that evidence. If it meets the evidential threshold to charge, and it is in the public interest to do so, then you proceed and prefer those charges. Now, whose duty is it to convict or acquit? Now that falls within the hands of the court.
You have an idea of the person who's taken your son, but then you don't know where to report, because there's a point of feeling that even if you reported, who would take any action against the state? So that puts them in a hard predicament. There's no redress. Again, remember we mentioned that this happens a lot in the informal settlements. So these are people who don't even have the money to go to court. The Constitution gives us that right in Article 21, that you have the right to demand for producing of the person, habeas corpus. But then that means, first of all, you should be aware that there's such a provision.
But there are a number of cases that have been prosecuted involving police officers. Previously, I used to work in Busia County, and by the time I was leaving, 2 officers had been convicted of murder, one of murder and the other of manslaughter. I left when there were ongoing investigations against officers who had been involved in robberies. Currently, I am aware that we are handling a matter in Mombasa where police officers in a police station were accused of having killed a foreigner while in the police station. We've handled that matter. We have actually closed the prosecution's case, and they were charged with murder, and we are expecting a conviction from our end. So yes, we deal with police excesses, and as an office, we do so independently. We are not influenced. We do so, we are guided by the evidence only and the public interest, no other thing.
Often, businessmen and women, mostly in informal sectors of the economy, have suffered at the hands of those who ought to protect not just their businesses, but their lives too. Running battles between street vendors and policemen in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, have become normal. And when these battles result in destruction, injury, and death, the world moves on as if nothing out of the ordinary has happened.
Tuko na ushahidi ya watu wengi sana katika jiji, ambapo ile miaka tumekuwa katika hiyo jiji ya Nairobi, kuna wenzetu wengi sana wameumia wakiwa katika hali ya kazi. Mtu ameamka asubuhi aende kutafuta riziki yake, lakini unapata jioni amerudi nyumbani na majeraha. Jioni amerudi nyumbani bila ile mzigo alikuwa amenunua ya kufanya biashara. Jioni familia yake imemkosa, ameuawa. Hiyo ni mambo ambayo tumeyashuhudia na macho yetu, na hata viongozi wetu wengi wameshashuhudia maafa ambayo watu wetu wamepata. Watu wanapigwa risasi, wengine wanapigwa visu, na wengine pia katika hiyo hali wamekufa na wamepoteza maisha yao.
You can imagine someone who's lost their family and they don't know where they are. There's been a recent issue about a young man in Isli who's been arrested, supposedly by a police officer, and he's been found dead some few days later. It's been on the local media houses. So you can imagine the pain that mother is feeling. You can imagine the pain the community feels during such incidents.
In the suburbs of Nairobi, Isli neighborhood, here the group is a target of rising bias and fear. Their businesses are said to be fertile financial fields for corrupt police officers. They are frequently arrested only to be released after paying bribes. To most Kenyan Somalis who live here, words like security and operation are terrible words to their eyes and ears. They know the ethnic trauma they will go through the hands of the authorities and the eyes of the public.
A lot of people, a lot of residents in Isli lack civic education, which is why they part with money. Even they ask their question, their names. So we need a lot of civic education, because the work of the police officer is not to jail you, it's to report you for the crime you committed. It's up to the courts and the judiciary to convict or release or whatever they want to do with you.
Almost 5 years after his death, Willie Kimani's abduction and subsequent murder will not be the last. And as family and friends commemorate his death, many others have since left. Not just lawyers though, students too, whom historically have been change elements within their society, are becoming easy targets for law enforcement officers.
The police in the country have a parochial and sectarian view of the public, in that the police are maybe they are told to believe that that the public is the enemy number one, and they should treat the enemy, the public, which is the enemy now, with contempt.
The University of Nairobi has for years been the bedrock of student action and mobilization. But this outspokenness has come at a heavy price. In 1982, the first chairman of the university's student organization, Tito Adungosi, was arrested and later jailed for alleged sedition following the failed 1982 coup. Adungosi later died in prison under unclear circumstances. His death may have been the first, but it wasn't the last. Decades later, Paul Oulu, another student leader, was gunned down by what witnesses claimed were policemen along Nairobi's State House Road.
As a student leader, you have to be very alive to the fact that being in the front line of agitating for student rights, you are the one who's being marked first before even the students.
For leaders such as Mwendwa, there exists a thin line between policing the state and trampling on individual rights and freedoms, a line that when crossed can have deadly consequences.
The students being youthful and being intellectuals, this is a potent force. The potency of the mix of youthfulness and intellectualism that is in students is the main reason you find that there's always a battle between the state and the student leadership.
We have been crying for justice in this institution.
In February 2018, Evans Njoroge, the Meru University Student Association Secretary General, was shot dead in cold blood as he attempted to flee from the police. Witnesses said that on the day, police officers drove into a private compound in pursuit of rioting students who were demanding a reduction in school fees. Other universities too have suffered under the brunt of the police gun. At the Jomo Kenyatta University of Science and Technology, students protesting rampant insecurity around the institution's main campus in Njoya were met by brutal force.
Any police officer who has been suspected or reported to have used excessive force should go to a compulsory training or should be laid off. Such a scenario whereby there were brutal cases in JQ at Njoya. And because we are also part of the community, we are told that the Inspector General said that they were laid off, which was actually false. We were told that they were transferred to another places. This thing of the police, the National Police Service is trying to tell us that this one is by building the morale of the police. I question between the public and the police, who are supposed to be taken care of.
Huyu askari raundi ya pili kumilika aligonga huyu kijana.
The impact of these killings has devastated mothers who have lost their children to police bullets.
Juu siwezi imagine risasi imepiga mtoto wangu na niko karibu na yeye.
For Moyo's mother and many others like her, solace has been hard to come by. Even the very places she could have been assured of some sort of solace are facing the same dangers that her son faced.
Hadi sasa naona kama tu siku moja ndakuja kuamka nipate tu nilikuwa naotanga tu. Hizi vitu zote zitaisha tu.
For Moyo's mother and many others like her, solace has been hard to come by. Even the very places she could have been assured of some sort of solace are facing the same dangers that her son faced. Religious institutions such as the church and the mosques have for decades provided safety for those fleeing persecution. Scriptures from the Bible, such as the one from Proverbs 6:16-17, says, "There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood," have been used by clergymen as a way of finding solutions.
According to democratic principles, which you can call them Quranic, biblical, the right to life is God-given. The right to freedom is God-given. We are human because we are free and because we are living.
Due to the people not understanding about our liberty, we find that especially police harassment and the main society in general also not understanding the cause of Rastafari. Many youths found themselves discriminated against, and this is a serious matter because the Constitution of Kenya gives each and every individual a right of existing.
A message that is reflected in other religions. Sheikh Mahmoud Mustafa from Al-Huda Mosque says life is sacred.
Na katika Qur'ani pia inatuambia in kuntum ta'lamuna fa innahum ya'lamun, ikiwa nyinyi mwaona uchungu basi na wao pia waona uchungu. Pengine tofauti itakuwa tu moja, tarjuna min Allahi ma la yarjun, kwa nyinyi mwatarajia kwa Mola kile wasicho tarajia. Maana utakuwa na subra wewe, utakuwa ni madhulumu, umedhulumiwa, ukamlilia Mwenyezi Mungu Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, kuna jambo wewe unaligonjea katika siku za baadaye ambalo yeye hatolingojea. Utangojea malipo mazuri na kufanyiwa kisasi na Mwenyezi Mungu ambaye kwamba ni Malikul Muluk, mfalme wa falme, ambalo yeye pengine kwake itakuwa tofauti, itakuwa ni adhabu. Kwa hivyo ni kitengo kinataka kitizamwe, kiangaliwe kwa kina, ili kuweza kumjenga yule mtu kabla haja kwenda kuamiliana na watu awe amebeba imani.
For retired Reverend Timothy Njoya, the pulpit moved from being a place of peace to an arena of violence as he and others agitated for better governance.
The nation could hear, shoot him, shoot him, shoot him. It is written very well.
Although Reverend Njoya may have moved on, those who came after him have suffered nearly the same fate.
Where we are failing to build relationship between communities and states. Because without that, then everyone else becomes a suspect and every other security agency becomes a kind of an enemy of the communities.
And news of abductions and killings are not just about congregants.
Katika sheria ya Kiislamu ni masulia makubwa. Vipi uliweza kuwatawala watu? Ulikaa nao vipi? Ikiwa leo hautoweza kuulizwa pengine na mahakama tofauti tofauti, kuna maisha baada ya hapa, utakufa, utafufuliwa, utapelekwa katika lugha ya Mwenyezi Mungu ambapo kwamba hakuna mkalimani au hakuna lawyer au hakuna kadha. Utaulizwa maswala yote na bila shaka utachukuliwa jukumu.
Somebody disappears today, another disappearance. Tomorrow, another one. The other day, another one. Without an answer from the state, that is how Kenyans arrive to the conclusion that if it is not then the state, then who else?
We deal with human beings, and human beings do change. We train them. Today they are very good. They are following all the orders and following all the discipline procedure very well. And tomorrow, shetani mbaya anamtembelea mtu.
People must know, not all cases will end up in convictions, and not all cases will end up in acquittals. In fact, if it were in the hands of the prosecutor to ensure that every accused person is convicted, then the courts could as well pack and go, because we would not need them. But they sit there as neutral arbiters to ensure that what we present meets the threshold, the law is upheld, and no one is unfairly victimized.
Gruesomely murdered for working.
But can a solution be found?
Very few democracies allow murder, judicial murder. I call it not judicial law, I call it judicial murder. Very few do allow judicial executions. So we cannot talk of extrajudicial executions. So I think what we need is to train the police, have people who train the police a philosophy, because Kenya, we change the philosophy.
Enforced disappearances have taken different forms over time. They haven't ended, but I'd say the hope is that now there's a national legislation that first of all protects Kenyans against enforced disappearances. Second, offers compensation for victims. It's still not adequate, but it's a giant step, because you're coming from a point when we didn't have that at all.
So I think it is time for us, the youth, to now step up and offer ourselves now for election and provide an alternative type of leadership that has integrity, that has a conscience, and leadership that is focused on being patriotic first and changing the society. If we have a new crop of leaders who respect the rule of law and uphold the constitution as it is, then that is where the solution lies.
Communities is actually an asset of security operations if the country wants to deal with a problem. Because one, there is no better intelligence than that is found at the community level. Because this person, before he joins any other network, he belongs, he has friends, he's a member of a family, he has a father and mother and a few friends and relatives there. And that is where the basis of even understanding what may have influenced this person. And if that person has been influenced, how many others have that person influenced? So if you think of getting rid of this person, maybe you have left another 100 outside. Have you solved the problem? You have not solved the problem. So look at it from all angles. Community is at the center.
What will it take for mothers to stop worrying over their sons every time they leave the house? When will fathers stop burying their sons? When will wives stop explaining the whereabouts of their husbands to inquisitive children asking about their disappeared fathers? Until then, the killing continues, the disappearance continues, the pain and the suffering continues.